the conversation between Jordan Peterson and Matt Walsh.
Whoa.
Here is, this is from the Jordan Peterson podcast. And apparently, Jordan Peterson asked Matt Walsh to explain the controversy surrounding Michael Knowles after he made his comments indicating that transgenderism should be eradicated. Now, of course, what is transgenderism? It is only, I mean, I don't know what that is as an ism, but one could imagine it is the right of adults to acknowledge their feelings that their gender, a social construct, does not match up with the sex that they were, or the biology, in some instances, that they were born with. And their attempt to take that social construct of gender and choose a different gender, or children doing it with the consultation and permission of their parents in consultation with doctors. It's the only thing. It's that you have the right as an individual, curbed by the fact that you may be a minor relative to your parents and doctors, to pursue being the social construct of your choice. And there is no other explanation for what it is, but they never quite identify it. But here is Jordan Peterson. I guess, I don't know what he's expecting to have happen wearing that coat with the leather patches, but we'll see.
He has to sling 2 guns over his shoulder to protect myself from the transgender ideology.
So now, Michael Knowles recently got in trouble for some words he uttered in relationship to eradication. And that's spilled over to some
incidentally,
degree into...
By trouble, he means criticism. He took some criticism, which, of course, is an abomination when conservatives are criticized. It is the sine qua non. The proof that...
Can you say that again?
We are living in an authoritarian world where you are constrained from saying anything except for in front of huge crowds of people and on massive platforms.
It's the sine qua what?
The sine qua non. Go ahead.
Your domain. Do you want to walk us through that particular brouhaha?
He of course it was the left, and I think usually it starts with Media Matters. I'm not sure who started it this time, but someone pulled a clip from his, I think it was a CPAC speech, where he said that I believe his exact words are, we need to, kind of a similar message to what I was just talking about. Yes, we want to protect the kids. That's our first goal, but it doesn't end there. Trans ideology itself, we have to defeat. And so we want to eradicate trans ideology from public life. And so it's the ideology that we're attacking. And of course, people interpret that, I think, in a willfully ignorant way. They interpret
the reason why people interpret it in the way that he's talking about is because there is no such thing as a trans ideology. There is no such thing as a trans ideology. There is no trans ideology. There is simply a belief that gender is a social construct, which he, on a daily basis, reinforces. Hockey's not manly. Yeah. This guy's not manly. That woman's not womanly.
She's not attractive.
In other words, the moniker man, woman is on a sliding scale, according to him. Mm-hmm. It is a social construct. You can't, just because you're a man, you're not a man. You can, like, if hockey is less manly, if men's hockey is less manly of a sport, according to him, than anything else, then by definition, it is a social construct.
And he's been confronted by the falseness of the binary by a student at one of these events where he does not acknowledge the existence of intersex people who are it depends on the study, but around 1% in many instances of the population. We would need further understanding to see how much that overlaps with trans people generally. But we know that that the binary is completely false, because there are people that fall in the middle or in shadings of the other. So you cannot create a binary if there is a sizable portion of the population, which he would call, a genetic abnormality or a mistake. That's what he called it in that answer. You can think that, dude, but it still exists. So that undercuts the entire notion of the binary and makes it about a spectrum.
I think in a willfully ignorant way, they interpret that as, well, we want to kill trans people, which of course is completely absurd, and especially because the first victims of trans ideology are the trans-identified people themselves. They're the first ones who are victimized by it. So we for their own sake, first and foremost, we want to eradicate.
Imagine that we were to say, we're going to eradicate this Catholic ideology, which has led
straight
to
ideology.
this. No, let's just say the Catholic ideology, which has led to, in Illinois, at least a couple of thousand. In Maryland, another 1,000. In Boston, maybe another 1,000 more, maybe, of these cases of pedophilia. We're going to save the Catholics from this ideology. They're the first victims. Mm-hmm. They are the first. Imagine if you said that. And what is it that you're going to do if you're going to get rid of the Catholic ideology? What is it that you're going to do? What ideology do you think the Nazis were trying to get rid of when they got rid of the Jewish ideology, right?
What were the Catholics doing when they went into different parts of the world that the West had colonized and forced their ideology onto people there? I mean, you can look very much into eradication of an ideology in service of another and see what deadly consequences that has.
Continue.
This ideology, but obviously there's nothing genocidal there. The real genocide, and I gave a college talk recently where I tried to make this case that going back to the suicide epidemic, which is a real problem among trans-identified people, but the real genocide when it comes to trans-identified people is it's like a self-genocide. It is a community erasing itself.
Well, it's even more demented than that, I would say. We've been fed this activist nonsense nonstop at an ever-accelerating rate for 30 years that the LGBT ever-expanding alphabet domain is a community. And first of all, it's not a community at all. A community is based on a set of shared practices, let's say, and shared institutions and shared values, let's say, and not merely on a set of infinitely expandable, subjectively identified proclivities.
Pause it. Okay, he is arguing that there is no LGBTQ plus community because they're only bound by each other by proclivities. Yet, he's talking to someone who just said that we're going after an ideology that is defined amongst that group. So it's either
Good point.
no values, no ideology, or only ideology. Like they don't even realize, they're so unserious here that they don't even realize that they have a fundamental disagreement right here. Jordan Peterson, because he's so desperate to say something about here, says they don't have an ideology. They don't have any values. They just like to party in the same way. And Matt Walsh is saying, we're not even talking about the individuals. We're just talking about the ideology that has trapped them. They're actually victims of the ideology.
They're victims of their own sin, you could say. I mean, it's the same kind of garbage they were peddling about gay marriage, that don't hate the sin or hate the sin.
Is their actions. And for Walsh, it is an ideology that's outside of them, that acts upon them. And they don't even realize they have a fundamental disagreement about the definition of the existence of this non-community or community or people or not people. And they don't even realize it because they don't care. They're completely unserious. This is just sheer bigotry, and they can't even agree on how they're going to dress it up together.
But when you drill it down, though, an ideology that is being imposed upon and making the trans people act in ways that is actually hurting themselves, you could substitute that for a demonic force and you would get the same effect, which is essentially saying like Satan is imposing Satanism on trans people and that's why they are the way they are. That's what it is, right?
So, and then worse than that, all the letters that hypothetically exist in this glorious rainbow don't exist peacefully without conflict. And here's the damning problem. Ken Zucker, who is probably the world's leading expert on gender dysmorphia in children and who had his reputation salvaged and his career destroyed by pathological narcissistic activists who he eventually defeated in court in Canada, by the way, noted long ago, before all of this became whatever the hell it is now, that the proper default treatment for kids with bodily dysmorphia was to leave them the hell alone till they were 18. And he established that as a consequence of careful research analysis in a non-political manner. And I say that because Zucker's an old school clinical psychologist, and he was essentially a research scientist.
Let me tell you something about old school clinical psychology. Being gay was considered a psychological, like a clinical psychological problem up until 25, 30 years ago. Just FYI. There was no politics associated with that. There was no belief there. It was just a function of, that's just the way it is, guys.
Yeah, so in 1973, homosexuality was removed from the DSM.
Oh, okay, so 50 years ago.
but still, it was classified as a mental illness.
This is a science. Go ahead.
Gender dysphoria treatment clinic up in Toronto, the foremost of its kind in the world, and was also the lead editor of the most prominent scientific journal dealing with transgender matters. So Zucker was actually as close to a reasonable scientific ally of the transgender community as had ever emerged. And what he observed as a consequence of his decades of work was that, first of all, the best thing to do with kids with body dysmorphia was to just leave them the hell alone till they were 18. And the reason for that was, well, first of all, the first reason was that about 80% of them ended up gay. And so part of the reason they were bodily dysmorphic when they were very young is because they were homosexual, and there was some tension between their emerging sexual proclivity and their biological reality, at least in contrast to what was normative. 80% of them would grow up.
Now, he just conceded that there was a time where the normative values, i.e. the fact that if you were gay, you're going to get gay bashed in either physically or mentally, or your parents are going to disown you, or you're going to be considered an outcast or a freak, became highly problematic for kids growing up in that environment. And that's what he means by normative values. And I would think that he would, and that therefore you shouldn't do anything with a body dysmorphia because it could be that the kids are just gay. Well, I think he would agree that the normative, and complain probably, that the normative values in society have changed. And therefore, the reasons that might contribute to body dysmorphia, and it's certainly probably in less numbers, if the case is that normative, the context in which you grow up gay has changed, and it's more acceptable within society. You can look on television, you can see, people being accepted in society as gay. That the causes of body dysmorphia, the fact that you may be gay at that age, And it's good that he's acknowledging that exists, because he should keep this in mind and bookmark it for himself when he's having this debate with Matt Walsh, when Matt Walsh is talking about why we should get rid of gay people because there's just a gay ideology that's making everybody gay. That the reasons for body dysmorphia, if you take off the fact that you're not as likely to be shamed for being gay, that body dysmorphia may be a function of people feeling like the social construct that has been imposed upon them because they were born with or without a specific sexual organ or with both sexual organs, that the social construct that was imposed upon them in the form of gender does not suit them or fit them or fit how they feel inside.
And let's also say that Matt Walsh and Jordan Peterson are currently on the political right, which is advocating for the suppression of any kind of education, which would make potentially being gay or bi or lesbian more accepted in society. They're literally calling these kinds of teachers groomers and banning books from public spaces that would create an environment where you could be gay and understand your sexuality in that way, because they're clamping down on that through censorship efforts in schools. So if it was just that, if they just were interested in clawing back the transgender ideology because they believe, for no reason, without actually talking to trans people, that that is just a bridge too far from being gay or having a different sexual orientation. If they really believe that, then they would want more education about sexual orientation in schools, would they not?
Of course. I mean, this is all, at the end of the day, we know this is all just a pretense. It is all in service of either a direct fealty to a fundamentalist worldview, which says that not just that gender is immutable, but that the roles of people in gender is also immutable. Father wears the pants in the family. Mother take care of the children.
Barefoot in the kitchen.
Exactly. That's what this is all about. Cannot let any deviance from that hierarchy exist, or the rest of it unravels. That's the thing about fundamentalism. It is binary. You do all of it, or you do none of it. That's the problem they have. All right, I think we've run out of time for the phone calls. Can you imagine?
Sad.
I know that we're not going to listen to any more. Maybe we'll play more of that dumbass debate between those two idiots at another time.